But what about this? It was no surprise that the one story at the weekend that got very little coverage from those wonderful people at Fairfax and the ABC, all the lefties, was the speech given by Donald Trump in Warsaw ahead of the G20 summit. Thursday afternoon, Poland time, about midnight our time. Don't expect the Trump knockers to give Donald Trump any credit. It was, by any reckoning, a remarkable speech about freedom. Those who try to see things objectively and are not simply Trump haters are arguing that this speech could rival what Ronald Reagan said in Berlin 3 decades ago in his Tear Down the Wall speech, the Berlin Wall. But I wonder if the Trump haters even listened to it, let alone read it. Donald Trump spoke thoughtfully. He put current conflicts into an historical context. He asked very real questions about whether the West even retains the will to survive. He asked, do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to defend our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? Well, I'm not sure the answers to those questions are absolutely clear. Flanked by the Polish Solidarity founder Lech Walesa and veterans of the Warsaw Uprising who fought to liberate Warsaw from German occupation back in 1944, Donald Trump said the West needed the courage and the strength embedded in the Polish character. I thought this was fantastic stuff. I haven't read too many others who thought similar. Honestly, I'm not overstating it. I thought this was fantastic. Some of the language was poetic. He said, the West became great, isn't this wonderful? Not because of paperwork and regulation, but because people were allowed to chase their dreams and pursue their destinies. He said of the West, we write symphonies, we pursue innovation, we celebrate our ancient heroes, embrace our timeless traditions and customs, and always seek to explore and discover brand new frontiers. We reward brilliance, we strive for excellence, and cherish inspiring works of art that honour God. We treasure the rule of law and protect the right to free speech and free expression. We empower women as pillars of our society and of our success. We put faith and family, not government and bureaucracy, at the centre of our lives, and we debate everything, we challenge everything, we seek to know everything so that we can better know ourselves. I tell you what, it's in language that Donald Trump has used on so many occasions in the past, isn't it?
Isn't it wonderful? And
fantastic.
Who wrote it?
Yeah, who cares?
Who cares? I mean, what president writes their own speech anyway? And the fact is that Donald Trump, this is his speech, he gave it with all the authority of office. And the people of Poland who were in that square, thousands of them, were ecstatic.
They were. And he kept saying thank you to them. Thank you, thank you. He said thank you a million times. He said
thank you.
Yeah, wasn't it wonderful? We value the dignity of every human life. We protect the rights of every person and share the hope of every soul to live in freedom. That is who we are. Those are the priceless ties that bind us together as nations, as allies, and as a civilization. Hey?
Well, what other leader in the free world speaks like this?
Good on you.
Unashamedly about God.
Yeah.
And this is what people don't understand about Trump. He speaks right to people about what they understand, which is that the greatest threat we face is from our own postmodern elite who want to erase the history and the tradition and the faith of Western civilization.
Yeah, it's brilliant stuff. I mean, he then said, where have I got this thing here? And you've made this point. Nations are more than the sum of their GDP. Faith in God, family, and the dignity of every human life are crucial to our survival. We can have the largest economies and the most lethal weapons anywhere on earth, but if we don't have strong families and strong values, we'll be weak and we won't survive. Our own fight for the West doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins with our minds, our wills, and our souls. What?
Isn't that brilliant?
It's magnificent. That's why I'm talking to you. There was no one else I could talk to. It's unbelievable, and it's been ignored. As you said, and thank you for what you wrote yesterday, because Miranda said, the Washington Post, the Trump haters, labelled the speech dark and provocative. Well, Miranda, if that's dark and provocative, I want dark and provocative every day.
Exactly. And, people were saying it was racist and paranoid and an alt-right manifesto. I really urge your listeners to read this. It is a remarkable defence of everything that we cherish.
Yep, absolutely.
And he is the only world leader who has said this. You know, he's gone further than anyone in this generation ever to talk about the values and faith in God that we all know is crucial to Western civilization.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when I heard it, and you hear it, and I think, I don't want to hear it, I want to read it. So I immediately went and got a copy of it and read it, and it's just magnificent. He said, the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? And appropriate, as you said, that it should happen in Poland, because he said the triumph of the Polish spirit over centuries of hardship gives us all hope for a future in which good conquers evil and peace achieves victory over war. Oh, God, it went on and on.
And the Poles really, they understand more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And this is why they are resisting the pressure from the EU to take in a quota from these more than 1 million asylum seekers who've entered Europe from the Middle East and Africa. I mean, this was supposed to be about helping the downtrodden refugees in Syria, particularly the Christians, who really are suffering a genocide and being railed. They have nowhere else to go. But it's not those people, those families in Syria that are being offered help in Europe and safe haven. No, it is just chances. Young Muslim men, I guess you can't blame them, from Africa and the Middle East, who want to go and avail themselves of the riches of Europe. But this is not what this was about. And Merkel has opened the borders, and there is no going back. She has changed the face of Europe and made it a much more threatening place to live. Look, George Clooney is leaving. He's as progressive as they get. He doesn't think it's safe anymore to live in Italy. You had 12,000 of these asylum seekers arrived in the last week alone. And Angela Merkel has the hide to stand up there at the G20 in Hamburg and act as if she's some sort of virtuous person and sneering, looking down her nose and condemning Donald Trump over some ridiculous idea that they're going to change the
climate of the world.
Of the planet.
I know. And Trump said, as long as we know our history, we will know how to build our future. But he said, in relation to the Angela Merkel, why we'll always welcome new citizens who share our values and love our people. Our borders will always be closed to terrorism and extremism of any kind. Miranda, we could talk forever. I think you summed it up by saying, get a copy, read it and reread it. I think it's one of the defining speeches in the last quarter. Read it. It's amazing. In part, he said, we have to remember that our defence is not just a commitment of money. It's a commitment of will. Because as the Polish experience reminds us, the defence of the West ultimately rests not only on means, but also on the will of its people to prevail and be successful and get what you have to have. Now, we're in this battle now, a battle of ideas in this country. The Liberal Party going left, is that where we want to go? Close to Labor. It's a battle of wills, battle of ideas. Donald Trump said the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? So it's quite extraordinary. And in another part of the speech he said, which was absolutely brilliant, finally, on both sides of the Atlantic, this is brilliant, our citizens are confronted by yet another danger, one firmly within our control. And you think, what's he going to talk about here? Yet another danger, one firmly within our control. What's he talking about? This danger, he said, is invisible to some, but familiar to the Poles. What is it? He tells us what it is. The steady creep of government bureaucracy that drains the vitality and wealth of the people. Now, you look at the moment, just at the moment, for example, we've got cricket in trouble. I'm talking about sport. Rugby in trouble. Every major sport is in strife. Why? It's overtaken by bureaucracy. There's bureaucracy everywhere. When I coached Australia, there were 3 people at head office. We beat the world. Now there are 300 or something. We're overtaken by bureaucracy. He said this danger is invisible. It's the steady creep of government bureaucracy that drains the vitality and wealth of the people. The West became great not because of paperwork and regulation, but because people were allowed to chase their dreams and pursue their destinies. Donald Trump, just phenomenal stuff. Well, an important step forward in this fight for freedom against extremist Islam. The long battle to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, is just about over. Mind you, if you see the pictures, the place has been trashed, hasn't it? How do they rebuild? Iraq's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi declared victory from Mosul just a few hours ago. However, he is yet to issue a formal declaration that the entire city has been retaken from ISIS. A handful of hardcore ISIS fighters now hold a mere 500 square metres of Mosul. Now, the battle to retake Mosul began 9 months ago. The battle has left large parts of the city, of course, in ruins. Thousands of civilians have been killed, almost 1 million people displaced. Mosul was ISIS's main hub and last remaining stronghold in Iraq. ISIS has now lost virtually all the territory it controlled. This is what Donald Trump was talking about, and fighting for what you believe in, as well as a number of its key leaders. Now, the reconquest of Mosul is important for the world as well as for Iraq, because deprived of its territory, ISIS loses a central plank of its ideology, namely that it is some sort of territorial caliphate. It'll really redraw the boundaries of Europe. That's what they're about. And that hopefully in turn now will undermine the potency of its message, even on the internet, which of course can't be controlled by military intervention. So there's a step forward in what Donald Trump defined as the battle for what we believe in. The battle to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, is just about. Nonetheless, that being the case, by February 2015, when they wanted to have it out, Pine and Turnbull and all these people white-anting, leaking, backstabbing, organising behind the scenes,